You know the feeling, right? You are sitting in a meeting, or maybe you are just trying to have a basic everyday conversation in your own kitchen, and you are suddenly hit with this overwhelming sheer frustration.
Oh, yeah, that wall of frustration where you just want to pull your hair out.
Exactly. You look across the table and think, I am literally surrounded by absolute blockheads. I mean, you present a perfectly logical argument, and your colleagues simply will not listen to reason.
Or, your boss makes these totally incomprehensible demands that seem completely disconnected from the actual reality of the project you're working on.
Right. It feels like you are speaking clear, concise English, and everyone else has consciously decided to speak some alien dialect just to spite you.
And it's exhausting, honestly. Those miscommunications totally derail your day, they spike your blood pressure, and they just leave you completely drained.
But what if the problem isn't actually that they are idiots? What if the problem is just that you don't have the dictionary to their specific language?
That is the million-dollar question, and it's the foundational premise of Thomas Erikson's brilliant book, Surrounded by Idiots, which we are digging into today.
Yes, and the mission of this deep dive is to basically shortcut your path to being truly well-informed about human behavior. We are going to unpack Erikson's framework so you have a completely new operating system for dealing with the difficult people in your life.
Which is so needed, because to really grasp the gravity of this, we have to look at the architecture of Erikson's framework, which rests on the DISC system.
Or sometimes it's called DISA, right?
Yeah, exactly, DISA.
Yeah.
And the underlying theory was actually first conceptualized way back in the 1920s by a physiological psychologist named William Moulton Marston.
Oh, wow, the 1920s. I don't realize it went back that far.
It does, yeah. But it was later developed into a functional behavioral profiling tool by Bill and David Bonstetter. So DISC stands for dominance, inducement, submission, or steadiness and compliance.
Okay, but Erikson translates those into something much easier to remember, doesn't he?
He does. In his model, these are translated into 4 highly accessible colors. You've got red, yellow, green, and blue.
Which I should clarify for everyone listening, the objective here isn't to force human beings into rigid, restrictive boxes.
No, not at all. We aren't trying to slap a definitive label on a colleague and just dismiss their complexity.
Right, because this matrix is really about revealing human potential by mapping out predictable behavioral patterns.
Exactly. The core realization you need to have is that the quote-unquote idiots frustrating you are simply operating on a different behavioral frequency. They're literally wired to prioritize different inputs and outputs than you are.
Which brings us to probably the hardest pill to swallow in this entire philosophy. I mean, before we even get to the specific colors, the book establishes a foundational rule that completely upends how most of us view our interactions.
Oh, the communication rule. Yeah, this one is tough for a lot of people to accept.
It really is. The rule is this: communication always, without exception, happens on the listener's terms.
It is a totally jarring concept when you first hear it.
I mean, we spend so much time crafting our arguments, right? We choose our words, we perfect our tone, and Erikson basically says none of that actually matters if we aren't factoring in the receiver's decoding process.
Right, because everything you project is immediately intercepted and filtered through the listener's personal frames of reference. Their biases, their historical baggage, their current stress levels.
Not to mention their inherent behavioral type, which acts as a massive distortion field.
Exactly. Ultimately, what remains after all that filtering is the message they understood, which frequently bears zero resemblance to the message you actually intended to send.
It's so true. And you cannot fundamentally alter how the listener's cognitive filter functions. You can only alter the format of the data you are feeding into it.
And the book illustrates this beautifully and kind of horrifyingly with the story of an entrepreneur named Storr.
Oh man, the Storr story. This guy is unbelievable. So Storr is in his 70s, and he has built this highly lucrative business from the ground up.
And he knows his industry inside and out. He's undeniably successful.
Right, successful but completely miserable. Because he genuinely, without a single shred of irony, believes that everyone employed at his company is a total idiot.
Literally everyone. He would sit in his office, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson, just raging about his staff.
Yeah, he would explain to anyone who would listen how Department A was full of complete imbeciles, Department B was staffed exclusively by fools, and he couldn't even fathom how the people in Department C managed to tie their own shoes.
And he didn't keep these opinions private either. He would openly berate his staff, calling them idiots, right in the middle of the open plan office.
The environment became so toxic and unpredictable that his employees actually engineered a survival mechanism, which is just wild to think about.
It's incredible. They installed a literal functioning traffic light just outside the main entrance of the building.
Yeah, discreetly positioned above the reception desk so he wouldn't immediately notice it.
Right. And a red light meant Stur was currently in the building,
Yeah.
and everyone should just keep their heads down, avoid eye contact, and avoid his wrath at all costs.
But a green light meant he was off-site, and the staff could actually breathe, relax, and just do their jobs.
Just imagine the sheer dysfunction of a workplace where your employees have to wire up a traffic light just to survive your presence.
It's insane. So the author, Thomas Erikson, is a young consultant at the time, and he is brought in to help Stur figure out his management issues.
Right, and after hearing this endless litany of complaints about the incompetent staff, Erikson asks Stur the most obvious, piercing question imaginable.
I love this part. He just looks at him and asks, well, who hired all these idiots?
It's such a perfect question,
Right.
because implicit in that question is the mirror. If you are surrounded by idiots that you personally selected and hired, who is the actual idiot here?
Which, predictably, Stur did not take well. I think his reaction was to physically throw Erikson out of his office.
He did. He threw him out and later remarked that he wanted to fetch a shotgun and shoot him.
But Stauncher's fatal flaw is a trap that is incredibly common in high-stress environments. His internal definition of an idiot was simply anyone who didn't process information or communicate exactly the way he did.
Exactly. He used his own behavioral profile as the universal baseline for human competence. Any deviation from his specific working style was just categorized as pure stupidity.
And that leads directly into the psychological formula Erikson highlights. It's behavior equals a function of personality and surrounding factors, or B equals F of P times SF.
Right, so our core values, our deeply held attitudes, make up our core personality. That is who you are when you are completely alone, free from all external judgment or influence.
But the thing is, in the workplace or in any social setting, really, nobody actually sees that core.
No, they see your moderated behavior. They see the mask you wear to navigate the specific surrounding factors of that environment.
The psychoanalyst Carl Jung articulated a really similar dynamic when he pointed out the fundamental asymmetry in human judgment.
Yes, the idea that we evaluate other people purely by what they do, their visible actions and moderated behaviors.
Right, but we evaluate ourselves by our internal intentions. We don't see why a colleague makes a specific choice. We only see the friction that choice causes us.
We judge their clumsy execution without ever understanding their underlying intent, which, honestly, is usually quite rational from their behavioral perspective.
Okay, let's unpack this listener-centric communication rule a bit more, because I have to push back a little on Erikson's premise here.
Sure, go for it. What's the sticking point?
Well, if communication is entirely on the listener's terms, if everything I say is at the mercy of their biases, aren't we just completely powerless?
I see where you're going with this.
I mean, think about it like a baseball game. Let's say I am the pitcher. I throw a perfect fastball, perfect form, perfect velocity, right over home plate.
Okay, a perfect pitch.
But the catcher has decided to wear a blindfold, so the ball just hits the dirt and rolls away. According to this framework, that miscommunication is somehow my fault. That feels like an impossible standard to hold people to.
The pitcher analogy is great, and it highlights the exact friction point people experience when they first encounter this theory. It absolutely feels like taking the blame for someone else's sensory deprivation.
Right. Like, take off the blindfold, man.
But the framework isn't suggesting you are powerless. It is suggesting that your current definition of a perfect pitch is flawed, because it totally ignores the reality of the catcher.
Okay, so the context determines the perfection of the pitch.
Exactly. If you know the catcher's blindfolded, throwing a 90-mile-per-hour fastball is no longer a perfect pitch. It is a reckless one.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense when you put it like that.
True communication power comes from learning how to take off the listener's blindfold, or better yet, just walking over and handing them the ball. You adapt your delivery method.
You don't demand they learn to catch blind. You learn to speak their behavioral language, so the blindfold just becomes irrelevant.
Spot on. So we aren't powerless. We're just currently throwing fastballs at people who are playing a completely different sport.
To fix that, we need to understand the 4 distinct sports being played in the office. So let's start with the loudest, the most intense, and definitely the most unapologetic of the 4 behavioral languages.
The Reds. The fearless alpha movers.
Yes, red behavior. These are the individuals who, When a crisis hits and someone asks, well, what should we do? We'll immediately respond without hesitation, we're going to do it my way, and we are going to do it right now.
Dominance is the absolute core driver of red behavior. If you look at the evolutionary psychology of group dynamics, tribes needed individuals who could make split-second, life-or-death decisions.
Without being paralyzed by consensus seeking or, emotional hesitation.
Exactly. The modern red is just the boardroom equivalent of that archetype. They are bold, fiercely ambitious, and entirely result-oriented.
They are task-oriented extroverts, meaning they project their energy outward into the world. But their focus is entirely on the objective, not the interpersonal relationships.
And they possess an unsurpassed belief in their own capabilities.
Mhm.
A true red genuinely believes that if they just apply enough sheer force of will, they can overcome any obstacle.
The source text has this incredibly vivid, hilarious example of a CEO who was just a quintessential red.
Oh, the soccer tournament story.
Yes. So his company decided to hold an annual spring soccer game. The intent was obvious to everyone else, just a friendly, team-building afternoon to boost morale and get some fresh air.
But a red doesn't compute the phrase friendly exhibition.
Not at all. This CEO steps onto the soccer field and proceeds to violently flatten everyone in his path. He is aggressively tackling his own employees, sliding into accountants, hip-checking marketing managers.
Which is just a terrifying visual, honestly.
Totally. So when a brave colleague finally pulls him aside and says, hey, it's just a friendly game, maybe take it easy on the staff, the CEO is genuinely perplexed.
Right. He doesn't get what he's doing wrong.
He actually pulls the company flyer out of his pocket, points directly at the text, and says, it says right here, it's a soccer tournament. Tournaments are competitions, and if you compete, you are in it to win. Why else would we be keeping score?
That soccer anecdote is just a masterclass in the perception versus intent dynamic. Because how do the employees perceive that CEO?
They see him as a dictatorial, aggressive bully who just enjoys trampling people. They assume malice.
But if we analyze his actual intent, malice is rarely the driving force for a red. He just wants to win. The red mind is fiercely efficient.
They strip away social pleasantries because pleasantries do not put the ball in the net, right?
Exactly. To a red, the objective is the entire point of the exercise. They're not trying to hurt anyone's feelings. They simply do not register feelings as a relevant metric when a tangible goal is on the line.
Which perfectly explains another wild story from the text about a boss named Bjorn.
Ah, yes. The 8-second phone call.
Yeah. So the author, Erikson, had just started working for Bjorn's consulting firm. Erikson is sitting in his car, stuck in a massive traffic jam, and his phone rings. It's Bjorn, the head of the company.
So Erikson, trying to make a good impression, answers politely and professionally. Hello, this is Thomas.
But Bjorn doesn't even let him finish his own name. He interrupts immediately and barks, were you looking for me?
And Erikson, just a bit startled, says, no.
And Bjorn says, okay, and immediately hangs up. The entire interaction, from ring to dial tone, lasted exactly 8 seconds.
The cognitive mechanics behind that 8-second phone call are just fascinating. Because to the average person, Bjorn's behavior is incredibly rude.
Right, it feels super dismissive.
But to a red, time is the most valuable commodity in existence. Quick is synonymous with good. In Bjorn's mind, he executed a flawless communication loop.
He had a hypothesis that Thomas was looking for him. He initiated contact, extracted the necessary data, which was the word no, and immediately closed the communication channel.
All to prevent any time-wasting pleasantries. Reds operate on a binary system the text refers to as slog or split.
Slog or split, right. Like if a task or a project has a clear purpose and moves them closer to a victory, they will slog through absolute misery to get it done.
They will walk over hot coals if it means winning. But if a task lacks a clear objective, or if a conversation veers into meaningless small talk, they split.
They abandon it instantly because it is just a poor return on their investment of time.
When you look at the famous historical and cultural figures the text categorizes as red, it makes total sense. Steve Jobs is a classic example.
Oh, absolutely. Notorious for his uncompromising aggressive pursuit of his vision. Or Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady.
And one that always surprises people, Mother Teresa.
Yeah, that one threw me for a loop. People often struggle to reconcile the image of a saint with red behavior, assuming religious figures must inherently be like gentle, passive greens.
But consider the reality of her life's work. Building a massive global charitable empire, navigating complex international bureaucracies, and negotiating directly with formidable world leaders.
That requires an absolute iron will. She wasn't asking for permission.
Exactly. She was a dominant force who identified an objective, alleviating poverty, and systematically bullied, pushed, and negotiated the obstacles out of her way to achieve it.
So if we know they are driven by speed, control, and results, what causes a red to completely melt down? Like, what are the specific stress factors that will make a red boss or colleague explode?
The quickest way to trigger a red is to strip them of their autonomy. If you take away their authority or bog their decision-making power down in endless committee approvals, they will become deeply combative.
They also have a near-zero tolerance for routine, mundane tasks that offer no challenge or opportunity for conquest.
Oh, they hate routine.
Mhm.
Inefficient use of time, like a meeting that starts 10 minutes late or wanders off the agenda, just drives them to distraction.
But the ultimate trigger is incompetence.
Yes. If a red perceives that you are making stupid mistakes or that you are moving too slowly out of a lack of drive, they will not quietly resent you. They will confront you loudly, publicly, and directly.
So if I am a listener right now and I realize my boss or my main client is a deep red, how do I adapt? What is the strategy to take off their blindfold and actually get them to hear my ideas?
The adaptation strategy requires a lot of discipline. First, completely eliminate the preamble. Skip the small talk entirely.
So no asking about their weekend.
A red does not care how your weekend was. They do not care about your dog, and they definitely do not care about the weather. Be fast, direct, and entirely focused on results.
So if you are walking into a pitch or a status update with a red, do not build up to your conclusion.
Give them the bottom line ROI in the very first sentence. Say something like, this project will save us $40,000 this quarter, and here are the 3 steps to execute it.
Speak their native language, efficiency, forward momentum, and tangible results.
Now, here is where the book's advice gets deeply counterintuitive. I want to really emphasize this. The text explicitly states that if a red comes at you aggressively, if they are raising their voice and demanding answers, you should actually argue back.
Wait, really? You should push back. If someone is already prone to blowing their top, isn't fighting back just pouring gasoline on a grease fire?
It feels incredibly dangerous if you aren't a red yourself, I know. But you have to view conflict through their specific behavioral lens. For a red, conflict is not emotional, it is a stress test of your competence.
Okay, so if a red raises their voice and pounds the table, and my reaction is to immediately fold, apologize, and become a doormat.
You lose their respect permanently. In their eyes, you are no longer a colleague, you are an obstacle they can step over. They're basically testing the perimeter fence to see if it holds.
Wow. So if you stand your ground, look them in the eye, and push back with hard facts, not emotion, but facts, you prove that the fence is electrified.
You prove that you are strong, driven, and possess the conviction required to be an equal. You step into the center of their storm and refuse to be blown away.
Paradoxically, this aggressive pushback is often the exact moment a red decides you are actually worth listening to. That is absolutely fascinating.
You have to earn the right to communicate with them by surviving the stress test.
Okay, so with reds, the entire universe revolves around what is getting done and how fast. But there is another very loud, very visible personality type in the office, and they couldn't care less about the what.
Nope. They are entirely obsessed with who is involved.
Exactly. Let's transition from the task-obsessed reds to the people-obsessed yellows, the charismatic visionaries of the DISC framework.
Yellow behavior is defined by inducement and inspiration. Where reds are task-oriented extroverts, yellows are people-oriented extroverts.
They are the eternal optimists.
They are cheerful, endlessly creative, heavily persuasive, and driven almost entirely by interpersonal relationships and social validation.
A critical distinction here is their relationship with time. While a red is ruthlessly focused on the present moment and immediate execution, yellows live almost exclusively in the future.
To a yellow, the status quo is just boring, and new is universally synonymous with good. They're driven by merriment, excitement, and they possess this uncanny, almost magical ability to walk into a room of strangers and make 10 new best friends within 5 minutes.
The source text has a story about a guy named Mike that perfectly encapsulates this relentless, almost absurd level of optimism.
Oh, Mike the Jinx.
Yes, the author describes Mike as Quite possibly the most jinxed man alive. He has the worst luck imaginable. He's worked for employers who suddenly went bankrupt, he's been robbed, he's faced endless setbacks.
But Mike is a pure, unadulterated yellow.
Right. So one day he buys this absolute clunker of a car, a rusty, terrible old Alfa Romeo. It's a total disaster on wheels. Within a week of buying it, he misjudges a turn and smashes it directly into a lamppost.
And the entire driver's side door is completely crushed inward.
Yeah.
Right? Just totally inoperable.
Exactly. So the author hears about the crash and calls Mike, genuinely concerned for his safety, asking if he's okay, if he needs a ride or a tow truck.
And Mike just cheerfully yells into the phone, "Oh, it was totally fine. I just climbed over the console and got out the other door."
That is the ultimate manifestation of the yellow mindset. It is an unshakable, deeply ingrained optimism that literally refuses to acknowledge the dark clouds.
A red would be furious about the inefficiency of the crash. A blue would be analyzing the financial depreciation of the vehicle. But the yellow genuinely only sees the silver lining.
The door is crushed. No problem. The car has a second door. They curate their reality to exclude negativity.
There is another example that highlights the sheer persuasive power of a yellow. A woman named Marianne, who was a sales director for a pharmaceutical company.
Oh, yeah, she had this overwhelming aura of inspiration, right?
Yes. The text notes that she could conduct a mundane Monday morning sales meeting and get her team so emotionally pumped up that if she casually suggested they all jump out of their fifth-story office window to boost sales, they would probably line up to do it.
That's crazy power. She could take an irate, furious customer who is screaming about a delayed shipment and just through the sheer force of her warm, smiling, radiating positive energy, have that customer boisterously laughing and swapping stories within the 3 minutes.
The charisma is their superpower. It makes perfect sense when you look at the famous Thomas Erikson sites, Bill Clinton, Ellen DeGeneres, and from the realm of fiction, Han Solo.
They rely on charm, a silver tongue, and an intuitive understanding of human emotion. They don't use spreadsheets to convince you. They use colorful imagery, storytelling, and appeals to your feelings.
They're the ultimate hype men and women. But just as we did with the Reds, we have to examine the chasm between their internal intent and external perception.
Right, because they sound amazing to be around. They bring the donuts, they bring the energy. But when the rubber hits the road and actual work needs to be completed, the text says they can be infuriating to the other colors. How do people actually perceive them when a deadline is looming?
When the pressure is on, others frequently perceive yellows as careless, profoundly selfish, and frustratingly unreliable.
Because their brain is constantly seeking the dopamine hit of the next new, exciting idea, right?
Exactly. So they are notorious for launching massive initiatives and then completely losing interest halfway through. They leave a sprawling trail of half-finished projects in their wake.
They forget crucial details, they miss deadlines because they are optimistic about how long tasks actually take, and in conversation they constantly shift the focus back to their own experiences.
So to a detail-oriented colleague, the yellow appears egocentric and entirely untrustworthy. But we must remember their intent. Their intent is never to maliciously drop the ball or sabotage a project.
They genuinely just want everyone to be happy, engaged, and having a great time. They just suffer from an extreme vulnerability to distraction by the next shiny object.
And the text highlights a supreme, fatal flaw in yellow communication. They are absolutely abysmal listeners.
It's almost comical how bad they are at retaining information someone just told them.
The mechanics of this listening deficit are crucial to understand if you want to work with a yellow. It isn't that they have a clinical memory issue, although they will frequently claim they have a bad memory as a convenient excuse for forgetting a deadline.
The underlying cognitive reality is that for a yellow, the act of speaking and the act of thinking are the exact same process.
Yes, they are verbal processors. They have to hear their own ideas out loud to make sense of them.
Consequently, when you are talking, they are not actually actively listening to your words. They are doing one of two things.
They are either mentally formulating the brilliant story they want to tell the second you pause for breath, or they're just zoning out because your delivery isn't entertaining enough to hold their attention.
If a yellow loses the thread of excitement, they will abruptly throw a completely new conversational ball into the air just to keep the energy high.
It sounds like trying to manage a yellow employee is exactly like trying to hold on to a massive bouquet of helium balloons.
That is exactly it. You desperately want the brilliant color, you want the lift, the visibility, and the undeniable energy they bring to a room. But if you don't take the time to tie those balloons down to a very heavy brick, they are just going to slip through your fingers, float away into the sun, and completely disappear when you actually need them.
The balloon analogy is highly accurate
Hmm.
because yellows possess very few natural boundaries or structural limitations in their own minds. They resist being tied down.
They view structure not as a tool for success, but as a cage that limits their creativity. So what are the bricks? How do we adapt to a yellow? How do we provide that necessary structure without accidentally popping the balloons and destroying the very enthusiasm we hired them for? What stresses them out?
The fastest way to break a yellow spirit is isolation. Being ignored, being left off a meeting invite, or feeling invisible is sheer psychological torture for them. They feed on social energy.
They also experience massive stress when they are surrounded by overly serious, pessimistic colleagues who constantly shoot down their brainstorming sessions.
And predictably, they panic when forced to deal with intricate structural details, routine administration, or complex spreadsheets.
To adapt your communication for a yellow, you must actively curate a warm, friendly, and open atmosphere. You have to smile, you have to laugh at their jokes, and you have to engage in the small talk that the reds absolutely despise.
When presenting information, strip away the minutia. Do not slide a dense Excel spreadsheet across the table. Instead, paint a picture.
Ask them, how does this new strategy feel to you? Because yellows navigate the world and make massive decisions based on their gut feelings and emotional resonance.
But at some point, the brainstorming has to end, and they actually have to, do the work.
Right. How do you get a yellow to execute?
You have to act as their external structural framework. You have to write the checklists for them. You cannot give a yellow a broad, long-term goal and just walk away, assuming they will break it down into milestones.
Because they won't.
No, they won't. You have to gently, diplomatically, and persistently hold their feet to the fire. You need to schedule frequent, short check-ins.
You have to verify that they're actually digging the hole you asked them to dig, and not just standing in the yard talking enthusiastically to a neighbor about how magnificent the hole is eventually going to look.
Okay, so we have the Reds aggressively demanding immediate action and trying to control the steering wheel, and we have the Yellows hanging out the passenger window, shouting at pedestrians and consuming all the conversational oxygen with their enthusiastic ideas.
But society would collapse if it were only made up of those two types. Thankfully, there is a group that is perfectly willing to let the reds and yellows have the spotlight.
They are the shock absorbers of society. Let's look at green behavior, the steadiness profile.
Erikson notes that this is, by a significant margin, the most common behavioral type in the general population.
Right. If you think about evolutionary survival, tribes needed a few aggressive leaders to make decisions and a few visionaries to imagine new hunting grounds. But the vast majority of the tribe needed to be highly cooperative, low-conflict individuals who prioritized the cohesion of the group above their own egos.
That is the green. They are the structural glue that holds families, companies, and societies together.
They are calm, endlessly reliable, heavily team-oriented, and profoundly thoughtful.
If the reds are slamming the gas pedal and the yellows are distracted by the radio, the greens are the ones with their hands quietly on the wheel at 10 and 2, ensuring the car stays smoothly and safely on the road.
However, their defining trait is that they are inherently passive.
There is a story in the book that perfectly encapsulates the staggering depths of green passivity and politeness. It's about a guy named Christopher.
Oh, the Sunday phone call. This one is unbelievable.
It really is. So it is a Sunday morning in the dead of winter, freezing cold, snow everywhere. Christopher calls Thomas Erikson at his home. They chat for a solid 15 minutes.
Just a normal chat, right?
Yeah, it's a lovely conversation. Christopher asks about Thomas's recent house renovations, gives him some highly detailed, thoughtful advice on a boiler issue, and even offers to connect him with a reliable plumber he knows. Just a relaxed, unhurried weekend chat.
So what happens at the end of the call?
Finally, as the conversation is winding down, Thomas asks, "So, hey, what are you up to today?" And Christopher casually, almost apologetically, mentions that he is currently standing outside his office building in a t-shirt in the freezing snow because he accidentally locked himself out while grabbing a quick weekend lunch.
No way.
Yes. And he was wondering if maybe Thomas could give him a ride home.
Consider the psychological restraint required to do that. He stood in the freezing snow for 15 minutes, providing amateur plumbing consultation because he was so terrified of being a burden, or of causing a sudden disruption to Thomas's Sunday morning.
That is quintessential unfiltered green behavior. The comfort of the other person, the harmony of the relationship always supersedes their own immediate needs, even if that need is avoiding hypothermia.
And then there is Maja, a receptionist at a consulting firm Erikson worked with. She was so deeply green that the word no literally did not exist in her vocabulary.
As a result, every single consultant in the office ruthlessly exploited her. They dumped their forgotten administrative tasks on her, they handed her their expense reports, and she just silently absorbed the workload and did it all.
On top of that, she was the emotional caretaker of the office. She remembered everyone's birthday. She remembered their spouse's birthdays.
She even sent polite email reminders to the workaholic consultants telling them it was getting late and they should go home to see their kids.
They are the ultimate caretakers. Look at the famous examples Erikson provides: Fred Rogers, Mahatma Gandhi, and Jimmy Carter.
These are individuals driven by a profound, overriding desire to help others, to serve the community, and to maintain peace at almost any personal cost.
But just as the Reds' drive and the Yellows' enthusiasm have dark sides in how they are perceived, the Greens' relentless pursuit of peace can actually be incredibly toxic in a fast-paced environment.
Right. You would assume everyone loves working with a green. They bring the birthday cake, they don't yell, they just do the work. But the text argues that greens can actually drive the other colors absolutely crazy, sometimes even more than a raging red. How does that happen?
Greens are frequently perceived by the more aggressive colors as deeply stubborn, indifferent, apathetic, and paralyzingly passive.
Because a green views external conflict as a threat to their survival within the group, right?
Exactly. So they employ a defense mechanism the text calls silent resistance.
Silent resistance. How does that play out?
Let's say a red boss introduces a radical new software system in a meeting. A green will nod, they will smile, and they will verbally agree with the new plan. They do this strictly to avoid a confrontation in the boardroom.
But internally, their stress levels are spiking, and they have absolutely zero intention of changing their routine.
Right. They will go back to their desk, quietly open the old software, and continue doing things exactly the way they have done them for the last 10 years.
To a red or a blue, this passive aggression is infuriating because it is sabotage disguised as compliance.
The metaphor Erikson uses for this avoidance is so visceral and disgusting, it really sticks with you. It's the trash on the table metaphor.
Oh, this one is gross, but it's so perfect.
Imagine you are sitting at a lovely dining room table with your family, but right in the dead center of the table, sitting on the nice tablecloth, is a rotting, stinking, leaking bag of garbage. Flies are buzzing everywhere.
How do the colors react? A red would immediately scream, demand to know who left it there, and order someone to throw it out instantly so they can eat.
A yellow would loudly complain that it smells, make a hilarious joke about the flies, and then get distracted by what's for dessert and forget about the trash entirely.
But a green will silently, carefully pass the mashed potatoes over the rotting garbage. They will ignore the flies landing on their plate.
They will smile and pretend the environment is perfectly pleasant, simply to maintain the illusion of a harmonious family dinner.
They will willingly suffer through a toxic, terrible situation rather than risk the social friction of pointing out the garbage.
That is exactly right, because to a green, pointing out the garbage risks starting an argument, and an argument threatens the cohesion of the family. Friction is their primary overriding stress factor.
Greens are deeply existentially stressed by the fear of the unknown, by sudden, unannounced changes to their routine, by being unexpectedly pushed into the spotlight, and by any form of workplace conflict.
If you aggressively dismantle their security and force them into a highly volatile environment, they don't fight back like a red, they simply shut down.
They become cold, rigid, uncommunicative, and entirely apathetic.
So what does this mean for the listener who is trying to survive in a modern corporate environment?
Right, because if you read any business article today, the only constant is disruption. We are constantly pivoting, restructuring, and changing. Are greens just doomed to live in a state of perpetual panic attacks in the 21st century economy?
They aren't doomed, but they require a vastly different leadership and communication approach than the other colors. You cannot simply spring a massive organizational change on a green on a Friday afternoon and expect them to adapt by Monday morning.
You will break their trust.
Exactly.
Oh.
You have to ease them into the transition, To successfully adapt your communication for a green, you have to respect their fundamental need for peace and predictability.
You cannot just give them the vision. You must explain the plan step by step. They need a map.
So when a red aggressively asks what we're doing, and a yellow excitedly asks who is coming along, a green quietly needs to know how we are going to do it safely.
The how provides the security.
Precisely. And if you need to introduce a major disruptive change to a green employee, you must frame the entire initiative around the security of the team.
You don't sell them on the increased profit margins because that's Red's language.
You show them how this new, slightly scary software system will ultimately protect the group's jobs, reduce everyone's overtime hours, and maintain harmony in the long run.
And there is one absolute non-negotiable rule when managing a green. Never, ever, under any circumstances, criticize them in public.
A red might fight you back, a yellow might laugh it off, but a public reprimand will destroy a green. They will retreat so deep into their shell that you will never get them back.
You must handle all constructive feedback in private, deliver it gently, and constantly reassure them that despite the correction, their relationship with you and their place in the team is entirely secure.
Okay, so greens will ignore the rotting garbage on the table just to keep everyone smiling. They hate conflict.
But there is one final behavioral type that doesn't care about social harmony, and they certainly don't care about moving fast.
They care about one thing, the system. And if the system is flawed, they will halt everything in pursuit of absolute, unassailable perfection. Let's look at blue behavior, the analytical perfectionists.
The blues, the compliance profile. Hippocrates originally categorized this temperament as melancholic, but in the modern workplace, we know them as the ultimate perfectionist realists.
They are incredibly detail-oriented, relentlessly logical, naturally cautious, and deeply systematic in everything they do.
If a yellow is a burst of fireworks, a blue is a human Excel spreadsheet. They are driven entirely by facts, verifiable data, quality control, and precision. Their core motivation is the elimination of risk.
The book describes a blue DIY enthusiast preparing to build an IKEA cabinet, and it is just the perfect contrast to the other colors.
Oh, I love this comparison. Okay, so if you give a yellow an IKEA box, they tear the cardboard open with their bare hands, immediately throw the instruction manual in the trash because manuals are boring, screw 3 random pieces together, realize it looks like abstract art, and then get bored and wander off.
A red would skim the pictures, grab a power drill, and aggressively force the wooden dowels into the wrong holes just to get the job finished so they can watch the game.
But the blues process is a religious ritual. They open the box with a utility knife to preserve the cardboard. They read the manual cover to cover. Twice.
Then they take a damp, not wet, but specifically damp microfiber cloth and meticulously wipe down every individual wooden panel to remove the microscopic warehouse dust.
They lay out all the hardware on a towel and manually count every single screw, cam lock, and washer before they even consider picking up a tool, just in case the Swedish factory made a fractional error in packaging.
To a blue, preparation is the only shield against failure. Every unknown variable is a potential catastrophe waiting to happen.
There is another fantastic example Erikson gives of a financial controller. This guy writes incredibly complex macro-heavy formulas in Excel.
He inputs hundreds of lines of data. And then, before he hits send to deliver the report to management, he actually pulls a physical, battery-operated pocket calculator out of his desk drawer and manually punches in the numbers to double-check the spreadsheet's math.
Wait, he is manually checking a multi-billion-dollar software program's math with a $10 pocket calculator. That sounds insane to the rest of us.
It sounds insane until you realize why he is doing it. What if there's a bug in the software update? What if a cell formatting error corrupted the output?
To a red, 95% accuracy delivered quickly is a massive win. To a blue, 95% right is just another way of saying 100% wrong.
There is no gradient. There is only correct and incorrect. When you look at the famous blues, Bill Gates, Albert Einstein, and the ultimate archetype, Mr. Spock from Star Trek, you see individuals who elevated logic, data, and objective truth above all emotional or social considerations.
So how are the Spocks of our offices perceived by the deeply emotional yellows and the fast-moving reds?
Predictably, blues are frequently perceived as cold-hearted, pedantic, hopelessly pessimistic, and agonizingly, frustratingly slow.
Because a blue's default cognitive setting is to immediately scan any new idea for flaws, risks, and potential points of failure, the other colors see them as a constant source of negativity.
They are the people in the brainstorming meeting shooting down everyone's fun ideas. But again, we must look at their intent. Their intent is never to ruin the mood.
Their intent is purely realistic. They genuinely believe they are protecting the company by ensuring quality and preventing catastrophic failure.
They are the ones utilizing methods like the 5 whys.
Ah, the Toyota method. This is one of my favorite parts of the analysis. Walk us through how a blue reacts to a simple crisis, like an oil spill on a factory floor, compared to the other colors. It really crystallizes their worldview.
Okay, let's imagine a puddle of oil on the manufacturing floor. A red walks by, sees the oil, yells at the nearest intern to mop it up immediately, and keeps walking because the assembly line cannot stop.
A yellow walks by, notices the oil, thinks, oh, that's dangerous, someone should fix that, gets distracted by a text message, forgets about the oil, and slips on it 10 minutes later.
A green sees the oil, feels a deep sense of guilt that someone might slip, quietly grabs a mop, cleans it up themselves, and never mentions it again so nobody gets in trouble.
But the blue?
The blue walks up to the puddle, crosses their arms, and asks the first why. Why is there oil on the floor? They trace it up and find the machine. Because a gasket is leaking.
The red would stop there and replace the gasket.
But the blue asks the second, why? Why is the gasket leaking? They check the maintenance log.
Yeah.
Because it's a cheap, low-grade gasket.
The third, why did we install cheap gaskets on a high-pressure machine? They go to procurement. Because the purchasing department was ordered to cut maintenance costs by 10%.
The fourth, why who authorized a 10% cut without consulting engineering?
They just keep digging. It's like they can't stop themselves.
Exactly. The blue fundamentally refuses to just mop up the puddle, because mopping the puddle is a symptom, not a cure. They are compelled to dismantle the entire systemic, bureaucratic failure that allowed the puddle to exist in the first place.
Listening to this, a blue is basically a human firewall for a company. They block all the emotional viruses, the impulsive malware, and the half-baked ideas that the yellows and reds are constantly trying to download into the corporate mainframe.
But the flip side is, sometimes they also block perfectly legitimate software from running, just because it doesn't have the exact mathematically verified triple-stamped security certificate yet.
They will halt millions of dollars of progress for the sake of absolute microscopic perfection.
That firewall analogy is arguably the best way to conceptualize them. And as a firewall, what stresses them out is unauthorized code. Blues are deeply, profoundly stressed by sloppy work.
They cannot handle colleagues who shoot from the hip without doing the research, which means they are frequently in conflict with yellows.
They despise overly emotional or sentimental decision-making. My gut tells me this is the right move, is the quickest way to make a blue lose all respect for you.
And they experience massive stress when they are asked to skip bureaucratic steps, ignore safety protocols, or bend the rules for convenience. If you tell a blue to just wing it, you will trigger an intense physiological stress response.
So how do we get past the firewall? If I am a red who needs to get a project approved by a blue compliance officer, what is the adaptation strategy to take off their blindfold?
You must over-prepare to an extreme degree. If you are meeting with a blue, do not ever attempt to wing it. Bring the data. Provide exact, granular details.
Do not tell a blue that a new initiative will cost about $10. Tell them it will cost exactly $9.73 and provide the itemized receipt to prove it.
Skip the cozy small talk. They don't want to be your best friend, and they find forced pleasantries highly suspicious. They want to know you are competent, logical, and prepared.
You must respect that, to them, the flawless quality of the work is vastly more important than the speed of delivery. And a crucial warning here. If a blue asks you a question and you do not know the answer, admit it immediately.
Say, I don't have that data point. I will find it and send it to you. Do not ever guess. Do not fabricate an answer to sound smart.
A blue will independently fact-check you. And if they catch you in a lie or a guess, your credibility with them is destroyed permanently. The firewall will permanently block your IP address.
Okay, we have thoroughly unpacked the four colors. The red dominance, the yellow inducement, the green steadiness, and the blue compliance. We know their traits, we know their stresses, and we know how they view the world.
But simply knowing the trivia of the colors is useless unless we know how to synthesize this knowledge in the real world.
This brings us to the philosophical shifts and practical takeaways of Erikson's framework, because a lot of people feel a deep, visceral resistance to this idea of constantly adapting to others.
It is a very common defense mechanism, and Erikson addresses it directly in the text. He shares the story of a highly yellow entrepreneur named Adam who attended one of his corporate workshops.
As Erikson was laying out this framework, explaining that to succeed, you must change your behavior to suit the reds, greens, and blues in your life, Adam became visibly furious.
He felt that the entire concept of adapting was inherently manipulative. He argued that altering his communication style was dishonest, a betrayal of his true, authentic self.
Adams' philosophy was that everyone should just be authentic and let the chips fall where they may. And honestly, I understand Adams' frustration. It's a very valid feeling.
He really is. A lot of people feel that way.
If I am going through my day constantly adapting, speeding up and arguing with my red boss, smiling broadly and flattering my yellow marketing team, slowing down and whispering gently to my green assistant, and then staying up all night building a binder full of verified Excel sheets for my blue accountant, at what point do I lose my own core identity?
Right. Am I just becoming a manipulative, people-pleasing chameleon with no actual personality of my own? It is the most important question to ask, but answering it requires a fundamental philosophical shift in how you view identity and society.
The reality is, you as an isolated, unyielding identity only exists in a vacuum. The moment you step out of your front door and enter the workforce or a social gathering, you become part of a highly complex, interconnected social ecosystem.
Erikson compares adapting your behavior to learning a foreign language. If you travel to Madrid and you take the time to learn Spanish so you can communicate effectively with the local shopkeeper, are you somehow losing your core American or British identity?
Are you betraying your authentic self? Of course not. You are expanding your competence.
You're recognizing that the shopkeeper has a blindfold on when it comes to English, and you are empathetic enough to speak their language.
It is not manipulation if your underlying intent is mutual understanding, respect, and effective collaboration. Behavioral adaptation is simply a social language.
That is a massive paradigm shift. It is about expanding your behavioral toolkit, not replacing or compromising your core values.
And let me tell you, having that expanded toolkit becomes absolutely critical when workplace tensions run high. The book uses a brilliant metaphor for understanding how different colors process anger and frustration. The shot glass versus the 50-gallon barrel.
This metaphor perfectly captures the neurological and emotional difference between how a red processes conflict and how a green does.
A red's emotional temperament is exactly like a tiny shot glass. It does not take much liquid or frustration to fill it up, and as a result, it overflows constantly.
When a red is annoyed, they explode immediately. They yell, they pound the desk, they let the pressure out of the system. But here's the key. 5 minutes later, the shot glass is entirely empty again.
They have expressed the frustration, processed it, and moved on. They rarely hold grudges because they don't store the negative emotion.
But a green's temperament is a massive steel 50-gallon barrel.
Exactly. You pour a perceived slight, a minor criticism, or a frustrating task into a greens barrel, and there is no splash. It just settles silently at the very bottom.
A week later, another frustration, another drop in the barrel. It can take years to fill up. Outwardly, they smile, they nod, they avoid all conflict, they seem perfectly fine.
But eventually, inevitably, that 50-gallon barrel gets full to the brim. And when that happens, it only takes one tiny, seemingly insignificant final drop to push it over the edge.
And when a 50-gallon barrel overflows, the dam breaks.
It is a massive, destructive, apocalyptic flood. When a green finally loses their temper, they will unleash years of meticulously stored up resentments that you didn't even know existed.
They will bring up something you said in a meeting in 2018. They wash away the desk, the office, and you along with it.
This is the danger of green passivity. You absolutely cannot assume a green is perfectly fine just because they are being quiet. As a leader or a colleague, you have to actively check the level in their barrel.
Which perfectly sets up the ultimate stress test of Erikson's entire system. The hardest communication task any of us ever face, giving negative feedback or constructive criticism.
You just established that you can't just be honest in a vacuum. If I have to tell someone their work is subpar, how do I tailor that brutal reality to all four colors without causing a disaster?
Giving negative feedback is where the DISC system proves its true worth. Let's break it down. If you have to give negative feedback to a yellow, you are navigating a minefield of ego.
You must sandwich the criticism. You have to flatter them first, remind them of their creative value, and explicitly reassure them that you still like them personally.
Why? Because a yellow processes professional criticism as a holistic personal rejection.
If you are correcting a red, throw the sandwich away. You have to be blunt, direct, and look them in the eye.
And crucially, when they inevitably try to turn the tables and blame you or the system for the failure, you must stand your ground and not back down.
For a green, the approach is entirely protective. You must deliver the feedback in complete privacy, speak gently and constantly, repeatedly reassure them that their job is safe and their place in the tribe is secure. Otherwise, their barrel will quietly fill with anxiety.
And for a blue, how do you critique the perfectionist?
You better bring the receipts.
Hand over the calculator.
Precisely. You need absolute, irrefutable, documented proof. You need timestamps, data, and pure logic.
If you tell a blue, I just feel like your performance has been lacking lately, they will entirely dismiss you because feelings are not a valid metric of performance.
You have to say your error rate increased by 4.2% this quarter and literally hand them the spreadsheet.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening, expansive deep dive into the human operating system. We have thoroughly covered the fearless, dominant reds, the charismatic, chaotic yellows, the stable, peacekeeping greens, and the analytical firewall blues.
But before we wrap up this session, I want to leave the listener with a final provocative thought to mull over on their commute or while they finish the dishes.
The text asserts a crucial statistical reality. Roughly 80% of all people are actually a hybrid mix of two colors. Very few human beings are purely one monolithic type.
Which adds a fascinating, deeply complex layer to everything we have just discussed about external communication.
Right. So if the vast majority of us are walking around as behavioral hybrids, I want you, the listener, to think about the internal dialogue happening inside you right now.
Imagine being a red-blue hybrid. The red side of your brain wants to make a split-second, highly aggressive decision to launch a product and dominate the market right now, today.
But your inner blue perfectionist is violently slamming on the brakes, demanding that you pause and build a 40-page risk analysis spreadsheet before you take a single step.
When those two opposing cognitive forces collide, who wins? Your biggest communication barrier, the source of your deepest frustration, might not be the idiot sitting across the desk from you.
It might just be the two conflicting colors warring inside your own head. It raises a profound question for self-reflection. Before you can master the art of adapting to others, you have to truly, honestly decode the operating system running your own mind.
Absolutely. And if you want to truly master these behavioral languages, if you want to decode the people around you, reduce your blood pressure, and stop feeling like you are perpetually surrounded by idiots, you need to read the full text.
We highly encourage you to go out and buy Thomas Erikson's Surrounded by Idiots to support the author and get the full, detailed experience. There are so many more nuances, case studies, and tools in the book that we couldn't even begin to cover today.
If you found value in this breakdown and want to continue upgrading your mental models, make sure to subscribe to the Decode Deep Dive channel so you never miss an analysis.
And please, scroll down and leave a comment below telling us what color or combination of colors you think you are. We would love to hear how you navigate the world.
Until next time, remember to check your own blindfolds, watch out for the 50-gallon barrels, and try to speak the language of the listener.